When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul.
Throughout the season of Epiphany, we have been looking at Jesus' own life, the model and example he sets for us about wellness and self-care and well-being, to see what we might learn for ourselves about how to care well for our own well-being. One of the reasons we chose to capitalize the word be in this theme is to remind ourselves that we are created in the image of God and that we are human beings, not human doings. So even as we look at Jesus' life and see him doing things all the time, when we look at the practices he put in place to care for his well-being, they are really reminders to us of his own humanity and our own humanity, that we have limits, that we must care for ourselves well, just to honor who we are as beloved beings created in God's image, and also to be able to honor all creatures and all beloveds, and say too that they are well. Throughout the season, we've been looking at stories in Scripture of Jesus' own formation and wellness. And in case you've missed a Sunday or need a refresher, or even more so that we can see all of these stories together as a whole, today's midweek reflection is going to take us through these stories in Scripture where we see Jesus focusing on his formation and wellness. I invite you to use this time of reflection both as a reminder and a refresher, and a way to allow these scriptures to speak deeply into your own personal life. Some of the first texts we looked at in January were of when Jesus was taken to the temple by his mom and dad to be dedicated. In this time of community, which is very much like our own baby dedications here at Calvary, we saw Jesus being blessed, being lifted up by Simeon and Anna. And this was witnessed by a community of people. And it reminds us that Jesus himself was not born immediately into this divine nature where he knew how to do everything on his own. No, he was an infant. He needed his mother's nourishment. He needed his father's role model. He needed the faith example of those in the temple, of those in the community. And so we see him being dedicated. We also see the story of his baptism, where he follows in the footsteps of his cousin, John the Baptist, and he comes up out of the waters after being baptized. And the voice from above says, "This is my son, the beloved. In you I am well pleased." This is a powerful moment in Jesus' personal life, I believe, of him hearing affirmation from God. And it comes before any of his public ministry begins. He hears the proclamation that he is beloved before he does anything. We also looked at the stories in scriptures of the Magi from the East coming to visit Jesus when he was still so very young. These are people outside of Jesus' own faith tradition and culture, coming a long way, following a star, following the guidance of the divine to bow down and worship Jesus. This reminds us already at the beginning of Jesus' life that there is a wider community beyond his mother and father, beyond his Jewish upbringing and community. There is a wider impact in the world around him that he will have. It's a foreshadowing of sorts of how we need communities of wide impact, people from faraway places and close places in our lives. We see the impact again of the community at his dedication in the temple. Then we see when Jesus is 12 years old as a little boy, coming to Jerusalem with his mom and dad for Passover, we see him run off. He's lost for a few days. His parents find him in the temple, asking questions, listening, giving wisdom to the rabbis and the teachers, again, allowing himself to be formed in community, not trying to figure out his faith on his own, but following his own spirit of curiosity and gleaning from the wisdom of those who are older than him to learn about his faith. And then, of course, as we begin to see Jesus live into his own call and go out and fulfill his ministry and mission, what does he do? He realizes he cannot do this alone, and he starts calling disciples, sometimes one at a time, sometimes two at a time. They are not experts in this stuff. They are people from a variety of different fields, tax collectors and fishermen. And Jesus says, I can't do this alone. Come with me, follow me, be with me on this journey. We see the importance of community and Jesus not trying to do the important work of his life by himself. Then we see these stories of Jesus going off to pray by himself, going off to be on a mountain. He pulls away from the crowd. And these times often come after he is healed and healed and healed, or taught and taught and taught. We looked one week at these scriptures where literally he's inundated by the crowds, and he does heal them. He does teach. He does engage with the people. He leans in, but then he knows when to lean out. He knows when to take a break, to pace himself. He knows that he needs solitude. He knows that he needs times of prayer. We see Jesus balancing prayer and justice work, solitude and ministry. Then we see this story of Jesus out on the boat, and there's a storm brewing and the waves are chaotic, and Jesus is resting. He is calm and centered. The disciples wake him up. They're afraid. They want Jesus to do something, and from this quiet place of centeredness and strength and assurance of who he is and his call, Jesus calms the storm. He reminds the disciples he is with them. And it's remarkable that in the external circumstances of this chaotic storm at sea, that Jesus himself is able to be centered and calm. That kind of strength and non-anxious presence doesn't come out of nowhere, right? No, it comes because of a life of knowing who we are in the good times, so that when the tough times come, we can draw on that centeredness and strength. Then we looked at a story of Jesus at the well. He's thirsty. He has a very physical need of being thirsty. He's been teaching. It's hot outside. He goes to the well and he asks a Samaritan woman to get him a drink. This is significant on many levels because he's not supposed to interact with Samaritans as a Jew, and he as a man is not supposed to talk to women. But here he is, not only breaking boundaries, but also just saying to another human being, can you help me? I'm really parched. I'm really thirsty. Can you get me a drink? We learn from Jesus in this moment that it's okay to ask for help, that we all have physical needs that need to be met, and sometimes we can't meet them on our own. Or even if we can, sometimes we just need a helping hand. We need someone to bring us a glass of water, somebody to quench our thirst. And then soon, this coming week, we will see a story of Jesus. He's on a mountain with two of his closest friends, and it's called the Transfiguration because he becomes kind of glowing white. It's a mystical experience. But what is significant for Jesus in his life is that there is this appearance of Moses and Elijah, two of the ancestors, two of his forefathers in the faith, who represent the law and the prophets, the very thing that he has come to fulfill. And he is met with their presence, and I imagine in that moment draws such strength, knowing that there are those who have gone before him, who have paved the way for where he is. And while Peter wants to sort of memorialize this and keep Moses, Elijah, and Jesus all right there in that moment, Jesus says, no, let it go, let them go. They are here with us always. Our ancestors, our saints who have been with us in the journey, our loved ones who have passed on, they travel with us. They not only pave the road ahead of us, but they are with us still. It's a beautiful reminder that community is both here and now, and community is beyond. And then we have this amazing story where Jesus is going about his business. He's actually in quite a hurry to get to heal somebody's son who is dying, who is ill, and he feels somebody touch the hem of his garment. It's a woman. She's been bleeding for 12 years, and Jesus stops. You know, he is self-assured and aware enough in his ministry, even as he is on a mission. He has a task before him, something that's very important, you could say, but he still allows himself to be stopped in the moment. He's not so busy that he can't pay attention to those around him. He feels something tugging on this garment. And as he acknowledges this woman's presence and her pain just by her reaching out, he says, "Your faith has made you well." Jesus acknowledges in this moment that he has power to heal, but more than the healing itself, what I love about this story is that Jesus realizes he has agency over his time. He can take this moment to see this woman. He can take this moment to acknowledge that it is in fact the woman's faith, her belief, her reaching out that contributes to her wellness. And Jesus blesses her in a way by saying, "I see you. Be made well." It's an acknowledgement of her faith and also acknowledging that he himself has power through the ministry of presence and time and awareness to give such a deep gift to people. So as we look at these stories where Jesus is caring for his own well-being through a whole different manner of practices and techniques, you could say, we see the things that emerge in his life. So in the story of the temple dedication and baptism, Jesus receives blessing. We all need blessing, don't we? We need people giving us affirmation and encouragement, reminding us we're beloved, reminding us of who we are. In these stories of the Magi visiting and being dedicated in the temple, and Jesus as a little boy asking questions in the temple, and in the story of him calling disciples, we see the impact of community. That we are not meant to do this stuff alone. Then we see in the story of Jesus going off to pray between all these intense seasons of healing and teaching, we see the practice of prayer and the practice of solitude. We have to have times where we pull away where we are alone in our lives, where we do not respond to the demands of others, but rather can set our own pace and reconnect with ourselves. And then we see in Jesus calming the storm a deep centeredness in his own life, an ability to be still in the midst of the chaos around him. Sometimes we achieve this through centering prayer or meditation or listening. Then we see through the story of Jesus as he is thirsty at the well, asking the Samaritan woman for a drink, we see that he's just simply asking for a physical need to be met. And how powerful is that as a simple technique of caring for our well-being, asking for help, asking for somebody to do us a favor, telling somebody what our needs are. And then we see in the story of the transfiguration with Moses and Elijah that Jesus is not only embracing a mystical experience, he's allowing his ancestors to give him strength. He's allowing the story of his past to connect him to his present and to give him a purpose for his future. And then we see in the story of the woman who reaches out for his garment, Jesus says, "Your faith has made you well." In that story, we see how Jesus acknowledges his own healing power, how he takes time to see this woman, to not be so busy, right, that he can't care for the well-being of others. And you only get to that place when you have cared for yourself well enough to be aware of what's around you, your senses, what's pulling at you physically and spiritually. What a gift all of these testimonies, these stories are from Jesus' life. So I invite you now, looking at this rainbow of practices of self-care and well-being, imagine that Jesus is extending each of these as an invitation to you. Which of these practices would you like to explore or deepen? What does that look like for you? What does it look like to pick one of these and dive deeper into forming community, forming friendships, creating a time for prayer, perhaps taking a risk and telling somebody what you need? What does it look like to tap into your heritage, your ancestors, to think about those you have loved and lost and what strength they may be able to give you? And how reflecting on that could actually be a tool, a technique for caring for your well-being. And then once you've picked one of these practices and kind of imagined what it looks like for you, think about what intention will it require of you to really dive deeper. Can you pick one concrete action or step to take this week toward the aspect of your well-being that you'd like to work on or deepen or expand? It could be something very small. I'm going to call a friend. I'm going to tell somebody I have a need. I'm going to spend some time in silence. What intention will it require for you to care for your well-being?
when peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul.